Well, today's business news is led by the RBA, which is expected to keep rates on hold at 4.35% when it meets today. But some economists fear it won't stay there. Joining us is the Chief Investment Officer at the Motley, Phillips. Scott, so are you among those who believe it won't change today?
Oh, mate, you know I don't do predictions, but I reckon about the shortest odds available today are the RBA staying on hold. There's a not zero chance they do raise rates, but it'd be remarkable given there's been no real expectation or pronouncements. The one thing that would worry the RBA since last time, 6 weeks ago, last time they said inflation was outside the range they expected for when it gets back to 2 to 3%. Not back in that range yet, but the glide path they had in mind, it was higher than that. Since then, we know inflation went up again. So this is going to be fascinating. I'm very, very, very surprised that the RBA was to really pull one out and say, you know what, time to go up. You're going to have to get used to it. The language around the statement and Michelle Bullock's press conference at 4:30 Sydney time today, they're going to be really, really important because, as I said, what they said last time was things are getting outside our expectations. They can only have got further outside in the meantime. We know GDP is flat. We know retail sales were negative and then only slightly positive. We know unemployment's down. Great news for those people with a job, but certainly showing a consistent and resilient labour market. So if you're looking for prices to come down, they're not there yet. Of course, we also know a couple of weeks away, tax cuts and plenty of options in different states and territories in terms of money being handed out by premiers and chief ministers. So the RBA very keenly looking at the past, trying to work out what the future might look like with all this money being thrown around.
There's a lot of cash handouts coming Queensland's way. Certainly an election year there. Now, there's a couple of competing narratives, isn't there? I mean, you've got the fact that inflation isn't completely under control here, but then you've got the US, which is talking about cuts now this year, which is who we usually follow, right?
Yeah, and the European Central Bank, the Bank of Canada, have already cut rates, saying, and look, to be fair, their inflation is lower than ours, so they've got more room to do that. But you're absolutely right, Pete. The thing about following, it goes two ways. You're right, they are talking about cutting rates later this year. That being said, they've actually pushed out their expectations for rate cuts because their economy and inflation is running too hot. So you kind of got both these things happening at the same time. But you're right, we followed the US up on inflation and then up on rates. We followed them down on both rates and inflation as well. The question really is what comes next. We still have people like Warren Hogan saying 2 more rate hikes this year before they start.
How do you feel about that?
Oh, it's not impossible, mate. Here's what I'm worried about. Economically, the economy seems to have almost stalled. Now, the question, household savings now at less than 1%. I don't, who knows, my predictions are predictions.
Yeah, no.
I think it's unlikely. I think it's unlikely because I think, frankly, the bigger risk, I reckon, is the economy stalling out before we get to that point. But it may not. Hogan's point is a really important one, is that the job market is strong, but also population growth has continued. And so you think about the added demand, inflation, his view is simply can't fall that fast while ever we have population growing and the job market remaining strong. And if that is, the mathematics is absolutely right. The question is that presumption, is that prediction correct? We've seen the government start to slow population growth. That's part of it. The employment market, as I said, is remaining strong. So the things Hogan has pointed to are continuing to happen. If they keep happening, I think he's going to be right. The question is whether the government can get those under control in time to allow the RBA to stall and then lower rates.
Okay. Scott Phillips, good to see you as always. We'll chat to you again soon.